Imagine dropping, I don't know, like 5 grand on a state-of-the-art laser treatment.
Oh, easily 5 grand, yeah.
Right. So you pay for this procedure to, rebuild, tighten, and just generally rejuvenate a really highly sensitive part of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And you do the whole thing. You follow all the immediate aftercare instructions to the letter, and you just assume, well, I've bought this guaranteed result.
Which is how we usually treat medical procedures, right? Like a transaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then, over the next few weeks, simply by coughing, literally just having a cough, you completely unravel the entire process.
It's wild to think about.
It is. The tissue doesn't heal. The structural integrity just weakens. And you are basically back to square one, or honestly, maybe even worse.
Yeah, quite possibly worse.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into a really specific, totally fascinating question. Can a smoker's cough literally undo the results of vaginal tightening and rejuvenation procedures?
And it's a question that really forces us to just abandon that idea that medicine is purely a translational service. We can't just buy a cosmetic or structural result if our body's underlying biological environment is actively rejecting it. So, the short answer to the question is resounding yes.
Yes, it ruins it.
Oh, absolutely. But the mechanics of why it happens, that's where it gets interesting. It reveals this mind-blowing intersection of physics, chemistry, and human anatomy.
Okay, so let's unpack this for you guys listening. We've pulled together a really diverse stack of sources for this deep dive.
Really good stuff in here.
Yeah, we're looking at medical clinic FAQs from places like the Women's Health Clinic and the Pelvic Floor Center.
Mm-hmm.
And we cross-reference those with some really dense physiological studies on pelvic floor mechanics from journals like MDPI. Plus, we brought in comprehensive medical reviews detailing exactly how nicotine alters cellular wound healing.
And what emerges from all these sources is that a smoker's cough isn't just this localized lung issue. It is a massive dual threat to the pelvic floor.
Dual threat, meaning?
Meaning, we have to look at the sheer mechanical force that a chronic cough exerts on the body's structural scaffolding. And then we have to layer on the insidious chemical sabotage that nicotine inflicts on the body's ability to even generate collagen.
Okay, let's start with the physics side of it, the mechanical threat.
Right.
Because before we even touch the chemical effects of the smoke itself, just the sheer physical force a chronic cough exerts on the pelvis is staggering.
It really is.
Reading through the biomechanics in these studies, the best way I can picture it is to imagine the human abdominal cavity as this massive water balloon.
That is actually perfect. The biomechanics of the abdomen operate exactly under those principles of fluid dynamics and contained pressure.
Okay, so you have this water balloon, right? When you cough, your diaphragm, which sits right at the top of the balloon, violently contracts downward.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a giant hand suddenly squeezing the top of the water balloon. And fluid inside doesn't compress, so all that displaced pressure just has to go somewhere.
It takes the path of least resistance.
Right. It fires straight down, causing a massive bulge at the very bottom. And in the human body, the bottom of that balloon is the pelvic floor.
Yeah, which is basically a hammock of muscles, ligaments, and fascia.
Just bearing all that weight.
Exactly. Every single time you cough, sneeze, or, lift something heavy, you create that spike in intra-abdominal pressure. But, and the clinical data is very clear about this, a single cough from, say, a passing winter cold is not the real danger here.
Okay.
The pelvic floor is structurally designed to handle isolated, temporary spikes in pressure. It can bounce back from that. The mechanical nightmare really begins with what experts call the repeated pressure stack.
The repeated pressure stack. So it's about the frequency then, the relentlessness of it.
Totally. A chronic, long-standing smoker's cough means that this violent downward squeezing of the water balloon is happening dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day.
Jeez.
And for months or years on end, it's just relentless. Over time, that repetitive force physically stretches and strains the connective tissues and muscles of that pelvic hammock.
It just wears it out.
Exactly. The American Urological Association actually notes that smokers are nearly 2 times more likely to experience urinary incontinence compared to non-smokers.
Wait, 2 times more likely? Just from the structural wear and tear of coughing?
Just on the mechanical strain, yeah.
Okay, but I have to push back a little on the mechanics here. Because the human body is highly evolved, right? It seems like a massive design flaw if a cough just instantly blows out the bottom of the abdominal cavity.
Right, you'd think we'd be built better than that.
Doesn't the nervous system naturally know how to brace for that impact? Like they keep the organs from just prolapsing downward?
Well, usually it does. In healthy continent individuals, there is this neurological mechanism known as the fast feed forward loop.
The fast feed forward loop. I feel like my brain could really use that for other things, like dodging a stub toe.
Right, it would be incredibly useful, but in physiology, it describes a totally unconscious, pre-programmed reflex. The central nervous system actually anticipates the mechanical force of the cough. Milliseconds before your diaphragm contracts and that pressure spikes, your brain fires a signal down to the pelvic floor muscles to brace for impact.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the muscles pull up, they tighten the sphincters, and they provide this rigid shelf of support for the bladder neck and the pelvic organs. So it effectively neutralizes that downward force.
So the body basically closes the hatch before the pressure wave even hits.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is what researchers see when they study patients where that system is actually failing.
Like in the MDPI study.
Yes, that study in MDKI looked specifically at women with stress urinary incontinence, which is the involuntary leakage of urine when you cough, laugh, or sneeze.
Right.
And the researchers used a really clever setup. They used vaginal dynamometers, which physically measure the squeeze strength of the pelvic floor,
Okay.
and they paired those with surface electromyography, which uses sensors to measure the exact millisecond the electrical pulse hits the muscle to make it contract.
Oh, that is really clever.
Yeah.
So they aren't just testing how strong the muscles are, they are mapping the exact timeline of the electrical signals during a cough.
Exactly. And the results challenge our basic assumptions. They found that women with stress urinary incontinence didn't necessarily have weaker pelvic floor muscles than the continent women.
Wait, really?
Yeah, on the dynamometer, their muscles could generate just as much force.
Well, if the muscles are just as strong, then it has to be a timing issue. The signal is arriving too late.
Spot on. The women with incontinence showed a heavily delayed contraction response on the electromyography. The fast feed-forward loop was broken.
Oh, man.
By the time their pelvic floor muscles received the signal and fired to brace for the impact, the intra-abdominal pressure from the cough had already spiked and driven downward.
So the water balloon gets squeezed, the pressure hits the bottom, the pelvic floor gives way, the leak happens, and then the muscles finally contract.
Yep, they missed the window entirely.
Yeah.
And when you combine that delayed neurological reflex with the violent repetitive force of a chronic smoker's cough, you create severe mechanical degradation.
It's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that late bracing allows the pelvic organs to be repeatedly forced downward day after day. This significantly contributes to pelvic organ prolapse, where the bladder, uterus, or rectum lose their structural support and physically bulge into the vaginal canal.
Okay, so that perfectly establishes the mechanical threat, the pressure cooker that stretches the tissue.
Mm-hmm.
Now we need to pivot to the interventions women actually seek out to fix this exact structural damage, right? And how the chemical reality of smoking just completely neutralizes those treatments. We're talking about vaginal rejuvenation.
Right.
So how does a non-surgical tightening procedure actually rebuild that stretched out tissue?
Well, it relies entirely on the principle of controlled injury.
Controlled injury.
Yeah, non-surgical vaginal tightening typically utilizes devices like fractional CO2 lasers or radiofrequency energy. So a clinician inserts a probe, and the device intentionally delivers intense thermal energy to the vaginal mucosal tissue.
So it's actively hurting the tissue.
It is actively creating thousands of microscopic controlled thermal injuries across the tissue bed.
Okay, so the laser isn't physically pulling or tightening the skin like a tailor taking in a dress. It's just inflicting microburns to trigger the body's internal emergency response.
Exactly. The body registers this thermal damage and rushes repair cells to the site. And the most critical of these are fibroblasts.
Fibroblasts.
Yeah, they are the cellular workhorses of tissue repair. When they get stimulated by the laser injury, they trigger what's called neocollagenesis.
Meaning new collagen.
Exactly, the creation of brand new structural type A collagen. And it also triggers neovascularization, which is the generation of new blood capillary networks.
It makes me think of aerating a lawn. You know, you rent that heavy machine to intentionally punch holes all over the dirt.
Yes, great analogy.
It damages the turf temporarily, but it forces the roots to expand and causes new, thicker, healthier grass to grow in to fill the gaps.
That's exactly how it works. Over a period of several weeks, that influx of newly woven collagen from the fibroblasts thickens the vaginal lining. It restores elasticity to the tissue, and it shores up the structural support for the pelvic organs and the urethra.
But, and here's the catch, If vaginal rejuvenation is like aerating a lawn to get thicker grass, the chemistry of a smoker's cough is basically pouring industrial weed killer onto that exact same lawn the moment you finish aerating it.
Basically, yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture of wound healing, the biological roadblock that smoking creates is just absolute.
Let's get into the chemistry of that,
Let's look at the pharmacology. First, nicotine is a highly potent vasoconstrictor.
meaning it shrinks blood vessels,
Exactly. It chemically forces the smooth muscle in your blood vessel walls to contract, radically narrowing the pipelines.
which means the blood flow to the area drops off a cliff.
Yep. Just when that traumatized vaginal tissue desperately needs a massive influx of oxygen, nutrients, and immune cells to heal from thousands of microscopic laser burns.
The nicotine chemically shuts off the supply lines.
Exactly. But it gets worse because traditional cigarette smoke introduces an even more aggressive saboteur, carbon monoxide.
And carbon monoxide is notorious for hijacking the blood supply, right? It bullies oxygen right out of the equation.
The chemical affinity is staggering. Carbon monoxide binds to the hemoglobin in your red blood cells about 200 times more powerfully than oxygen does.
200 times, wow.
Yeah, it physically displaces the oxygen and takes its seat. So not only are the blood vessels clamped down to a fraction of their normal size by the nicotine,
But the tiny trickle of blood that actually does manage to get through to the vaginal tissue is carrying carbon monoxide instead of the oxygen those cells require to survive.
exactly, you are creating a profoundly hypoxic, oxygen-starved microenvironment.
So if the fibroblasts, the cells responsible for weaving that new collagen to tighten the tissue, are completely starved of oxygen, what happens to the repair process?
It just halts. The medical reviews on nicotine's impact on wound healing demonstrate that hypoxia directly disrupts collagen synthesis.
They just stop working.
Without oxygen, those fibroblasts cannot manufacture the strong, organized type I collagen needed for structural repair. Instead, if they heal at all, they produce weaker, disorganized scar tissue.
Oh, that's brutal. So you've paid thousands of dollars to have a laser intentionally damage your tissue in order to force a healing response, but your daily habits have chemically paralyzed the exact cells required to execute that healing.
And the clinical result is heavily compromised. You see dramatically slower tissue recovery, highly diminished tightening results, and a significantly elevated risk of infection and complication.
Because the biological building blocks were just denied to the tissue.
Right. The expensive procedure fails because the body wasn't given what it needed to rebuild.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because most people know combusting tobacco is terrible for them. They know about the tar and the carbon monoxide.
Sure.
So the logical loophole a patient might try to exploit is switching to quote-unquote safer alternatives. Like, what if someone booking a vaginal tightening procedure just switches to vaping or uses a high-dose nicotine patch for a month?
It is honestly the most common rationalization patients make when facing these procedures.
Well, it makes intuitive sense. I mean, if a patient is using a nicotine patch or an e-cigarette, they aren't inhaling burning paper or tar.
Right.
They aren't flooding their hemoglobin with carbon monoxide. And crucially, they aren't suffering from that violent, repetitive smoker's cough anymore. So the mechanical water balloon threat is gone. The carbon monoxide hypoxia is gone. Shouldn't the laser treatment work just fine?
It is a totally logical deduction, but it exposes a fundamental misunderstanding of the cellular pharmacology.
Okay, tell me why I'm wrong.
While vaping and patches do eliminate the combustion toxins, the nicotine itself remains a massive, independent biological saboteur.
Wait, even without the smoke or the cough, the nicotine molecule alone is enough to ruin the laser result.
Absolutely. The European Society of Medicine published this comprehensive review comparing the wound-healing impacts of cigarettes, vaping, and patches. They found that nicotine acts as a profound cellular inhibitor all on its own. I mean, we already established it causes severe vasoconstriction, but at a microscopic level, nicotine directly paralyzes keratinocyte migration.
Keratinocyte migration, what is that?
Keratinocytes are the specialized cells that travel across a wound bed to close it up and restore the epithelial barrier. Nicotine essentially freezes them in place. They literally cannot travel to the micro wounds caused by the laser to repair the surface.
Oh, wow. Wait, there was another cellular process mentioned in the sources regarding nicotine. Oxidative phosphorylation. I'm trying to deduce this from the name. Is that the mechanism the cell uses to actually burn oxygen for fuel?
You're right on the money. Rather than using the old textbook cliche of mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell, Think of them like a high-performance combustion engine inside every cell.
Okay, an engine.
That engine needs a specific mixture of fuel and oxygen to generate the energy required to heal tissue. Oxidative phosphorylation is that internal engine running.
And nicotine messes with the engine.
Nicotine physically interferes with it. It basically fouls the spark plugs. The cells literally cannot generate the metabolic energy required to synthesize collagen, even if they had the oxygen available.
That's insane.
And furthermore, nicotine aggressively suppresses the localized immune system, leaving those thousands of thermal laser injuries highly susceptible to bacterial infection.
So what does this all mean for someone looking to invest in pelvic floor rejuvenation? Is there like a taper down period or a safe threshold of nicotine?
The clinical consensus leaves no room for negotiation here. The medical guidelines require the absolute cessation of all nicotine products: cigarettes, vapes, patches, gums, lozenges, all of it.
And I'm guessing it can't just be the day before the procedure.
Definitely not. The standard recommendation is to stop completely at least 4 to 6 weeks prior to any surgical or laser wound healing procedure.
4 to 6 weeks of zero nicotine, just to establish a baseline where the body isn't actively fighting itself.
Yeah, it takes roughly that long for the smooth muscle in the blood vessels to relax and regain normal elasticity, and for the immune response to stop being suppressed, and for those cellular engines to recover their ability to metabolize energy and weave collagen.
It really highlights how deeply interconnected our biological systems are.
Yeah.
You cannot treat a localized pelvic floor issue without addressing the systemic chemistry of the bloodstream and the lungs.
Everything touches everything else.
Which leads us to the reality of lived experience. Quitting nicotine is brutally difficult. And even for non-smokers, we live in a world of respiratory illnesses. People get the flu, they get bronchitis, they suffer from seasonal allergies.
Oh, constantly.
Given that we can't just pause illness, how does someone actually defend their pelvic floor in the real world?
Well, the most vital paradigm shift for a patient is understanding that treating the chest is treating the pelvic floor.
Treating the chest is treating the pelvic floor. I like that.
Yeah. If you have asthma, managing it aggressively with inhalers is a direct form of pelvic floor protection. If you have a chronic cough from acid reflux or a lingering post-viral hack, treating the root cause of that cough is just as important as doing Kegel exercises.
You have to shut off the mechanical pressure at the source.
Exactly.
But what if you were going through a bad bout of bronchitis right after your procedure? Are there physical tools you can use to protect the tissue while it heals?
There are. Clinicians will often utilize mechanical supports during these vulnerable periods. A patient might be fitted for a pessary, which is a firm silicone ring inserted high into the vaginal canal.
So it props things up.
Right, it acts as a physical scaffold, holding the bladder and uterus up so that when the patient coughs, the organs have nowhere to drop.
Oh, that makes sense.
Alternatively, there are external compression garments that provide counterpressure from the outside, helping to absorb that downward hydraulic shock.
Let's talk about the exact moment of crisis, though. You're walking down the street, you feel a massive sneeze or a coughing fit coming on, and you know your pelvic floor is vulnerable from a recent procedure. You don't have a pessary.
Okay, real-world scenario.
Right. What can you do right then and there to protect the investment you just made in your body?
This brings us to an incredibly effective, highly actionable technique taught in pelvic physiotherapy known as the knack.
The knack. It sounds very mysterious, like a secret martial art for your organs.
It operates very much like a defensive martial art. Let's return to that fast feed-forward loop we discussed earlier.
The automatic bracing reflex.
Exactly. The central nervous system is supposed to unconsciously pre-contract your pelvic muscles milliseconds before the cough hits. But in many people, that reflex is severely delayed. The hatch stays open.
Right, the muscles fire, but the pressure wave has already blown past them.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing the knack is a conscious override of that delayed automatic system.
You got it. It is a manual neuromuscular override. Because your automatic system is failing to brace the structure in time, you have to execute the brace consciously.
How do you do it?
The knack involves actively and forcefully contracting the pelvic floor muscles, pulling up and in, squeezing the sphincters tightly just before and continuously during a cough, a sneeze, or a heavy lift.
So I'm trying to visualize the sequence.
Yeah.
You feel the tickle in your throat. Before you even draw the breath to let the cough out, you consciously bear down. Well, no, you pull up.
Yes, you pull up.
Like pull the pelvic floor up and lock it. And you hold that lock until the coughing fit is completely over.
You've got the exact mechanics. By manually seizing control of those muscles before the pressure wave hits, you provide a rigid, active floor of support for the bladder neck. You completely counteract that violent downward spike in intra-abdominal pressure.
That's so practical.
It requires conscious practice to turn it into an automatic habit. But clinical studies demonstrate that consistently utilizing the neck dramatically reduces urine leakage and shields the ligaments from prolapse strain.
It is incredibly empowering to realize that even if your automated reflexes are compromised, you can manually intervene to protect your body's structural integrity.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have covered some serious physiological ground today. Let's quickly recap the journey for you guys. We started with a highly specific question. Can a smoker's cough undo a vaginal tightening procedure? And the sources revealed a brutal dual threat.
Mechanical and chemical.
Right. Mechanically, the chronic downward hydraulic pressure of a cough acts like a giant hand squeezing a water balloon,
Yeah.
exploiting delayed nerve reflexes and physically tearing at the pelvic hammock.
And the chemical side of the equation is pure biological sabotage. Nicotine, whether inhaled from a vape, smoked in a cigarette, or absorbed through a patch, acts as a severe vasoconstrictor that starves the tissue of blood.
It just shuts the blood flow down.
Yep. It paralyzes the migration of repair cells, fouls the cellular engines that produce energy, and halts the neocollagenesis that expensive laser treatments entirely rely on to rebuild the tissue.
The mechanical coughing physically pushes the organs and tissue down, while the localized hypoxia ensures the tissue literally lacks the energy to heal or tighten back up. It is a perfectly engineered storm of failure.
It really is. And, this raises an important question, one that extends far beyond pelvic health.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we so frequently view cosmetic or medical rejuvenation procedures as external fixes commodities we simply purchase to erase the miles we've put on our bodies.
Yeah, like getting your car detailed.
Exactly. But given how absolutely a chemical like nicotine dictates the microscopic behavior of our fibroblasts, the diameter of our blood vessels, and the fundamental energy production of our cells, how much of what we perceive as our body's inevitable aging or structural failure is actually just a direct reflection of the invisible daily chemical environment we force ourselves to survive in?
Wow, that fundamentally shifts the perspective. It's never just about what you pay a clinician to do to your body. It's about the biological partnership you maintain with your body every single day.
Couldn't have said it better.
A truly fascinating deep dive today. Thank you for exploring it with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.